Meanwhile, we're going to talk about it narrow way. A group of leading conservatives joined forces on debt and spending today. They penned an op-ed on why the threat of a debt default ought to be used to force a balanced budget. A threat of a debt default. Oh, my gosh. I believe this is completely dead wrong. I think it'll lower our credit rating, damage our economy. By the way, it's totally unworkable. But we've got to talk. Joining me now is the co-author of that op-ed, Mike Needham. He's the CEO of Heritage Action for America. And we bring back our friend and CNBC contributor, Tony Fratto, who's a former Bush White House Deputy Press Secretary. Mr. Needham, let me begin with you. I want to cut spending like nobody's business. But you mess around with the debt ceiling, I'm going to tell you, buddy, the whole world, fiscally, economically, and politically, is going to come crashing down in your head.
Yeah, Larry, nobody wants to mess with the debt ceiling. What we want to do is have a very reasonable plan, which is to raise the debt ceiling while getting on a path to balance. Look, the only way to get spending cuts is to fight for spending cuts. The only way to have a debate is to have a debate. And for the Republican Party to build in a bunch of assumptions right now about what the president will or won't do 6 weeks from now, when we haven't even had the debate, is putting the cart before the horse. Let's talk about a very reasonable plan to be able to look at an 8-year-old child in the eyes and say, we're going to raise the debt limit so that when you go to college, we have our nation's fiscal house in order. Let's have that debate.
All right. Well, I want to have that debate. Tony Fratto, you look at the Wall Street Journal today, a couple of important news articles. These are news articles. Yeah. GOP split on debt ceiling approach. That's one. Some in GOP don't pay all the bills now. All right. Debt default and prioritization. Okay. Prioritization in particular, Tony. There's 80 million payments per month. Can you imagine this prioritization plan? This will, it's beyond the pale.
Yeah, it's really not workable at all, Larry. I mean, I think when people, I think it's hard for people to get their arms around just how big and complex a $3.2 trillion economy government it is, and all of these transactions and how they work. And there's not a great understanding of just the flow of cash in government. Now, in order to do prioritization, we need to stop a whole lot of payments, which may be technically impossible to do, in order to make some other payments. But to make those other payments presumes that you've got revenue that has come in on time in order to make those payments, like interest payments on the debt. So just from a cash flow standpoint, on a daily cash flow basis, it's probably impossible to do. It's certainly impossible to do for any length of time. But the bigger question, Larry, is why anybody thinks that's wise, right? I mean, why anybody thinks that we were going to turn off payments to, government contractors, perhaps to Social Security recipients,
veterans, food
in order
stamps.
To pay interest to, the Chinese and Japanese who, half of whom own our debt.
I mean,
right?
Mike Needham.
Well, Tony, I think there's a bunch of red herrings in there. Nobody wants to go past the debt limit, but nobody also wants to sit in a pot of simmering water waiting for it to boil.
If nobody wants to use the debt ceiling, then stop using the debt ceiling. You're going to have a continuing resolution that runs out 2 weeks afterwards. Why even risk? In fact, if this is the rhetorical fight that you want to have.
The problem with the Republican Party is we get into this incrementalism where we assume we can never win, and we keep putting off the debate.
It's not an assumption, because
let's have a debate for the next month about whether or not we should balance our budget for our children. If we get here a month from now, let's come back.
The debt ceiling will be raised, right?
I agree. The debt limit should be raised. It should be raised. And it should be raised with spending cuts and policy changes.
Why?
So we can put our nation on a path to balance.
Why not have that fight on the continuing resolution
we should have them on the CR.
When you're talking about future spending and not threatening the full faith and credit of the U.S. government?
Nobody's threatening the full faith and credit.
It actually undermines your argument to have it during the debt ceiling debate.
Look, we need to have this debate right now. We need to have this debate for the next month, and we need to come together a month from now and figure out where we stand. But to prejudge this debate and say the president's not going to do X, the president's not going to accept cuts, before we've gone to the American people and say it is totally unreasonable to have a president of the United States who doesn't think we have a spending
policy. It's not
unreasonable. That's just totally unreasonable.
If I was back in the White House, I think I would be advising the president the same thing. I think I would look down to Congress and say, you guys send me a bill to raise the debt ceiling.
You'd be advising the president not to take any spending cuts.
Use the spending sequester. The spending sequester is so important to drive through. And then the continuing resolution, a lot of damage can be done on these 3 to 6 month CRs. Anyway, we'll have you back. Mike Needham, thank you very much. Tony Fratto.